So in this video segment, we'll examine more on the set of methods and functions that Panda supports. Um, the concept is important not in terms of trying to understand any scientific theory or whatnot, but more because of the way Pandas is being designed. It is built on top of Matplotlib, which contains PyPlot, right? So we would like to understand how they interact more so that we will be able to more skillfully operate all the functions and the libraries without getting some sort of nasty, undesirable outcomes, or else trying for hours as to how to twiddle that part of the graph and chart and just basically being very, very inefficient. So the main concept is important in this sense that our data frame obviously sits in pandas natural context, and we refer to a data frame with df. I think this is the syntax we are all very familiar with. We'll do df dot shape, df dot this and that, right? So therefore, very naturally, when we want to plot charts using pandas, we will say data frame, go plot yourself, right? So df dot plot, and that is the kind of command we will actually use. However, there are times, and it's not very rarely, that we will actually directly ask pyplot to do something. For example, pyplot dot figure, run that function in order to start a new figure, to start a new charting area. So when we do that, what does it mean? Why do we suddenly jump back and forth, right? So this is the reason why. All right. Now there's no easy way to for the pandas library to say, well, df dot pyplot dot figure. It just doesn't look and sound right in terms of the way we organize the charts and the drawing areas. Next is also there are times we want to directly access the slightly lower level graphical components. What are they? They are a bit like figure. What's a figure? What's an AX? What Pyplot might say axis? AXES. All right. So what are axes? Do they correspond with series? No, not really. Do they correspond with data frames? Not really, not directly. So what are they and how do we think about all these? So I hope with this diagram that I actually carefully and painstakingly come up with, it will summarize all the interrelationships. Now, of course, not in all gory details, but holistically at the top level, at least now we can see what term refers to which part of the chart or what aspect of the data frame. Now, for example, very importantly, when we say df.plot, what are we getting? We are getting an axis. All right, we're getting an axis. Now, this axis, I need to say just a quick word about it. I've kind of combed through pandas and matplotlib and pyplot and google in general at the time of my research or search. um, the best I can come up with is axis is always axis, and it does not refer to many chopping axes. It is not the plural form of axis and therefore axis. There is no singular form of axis. You don't call it x. So it sounds very confusing to say to tell your colleague that x is not properly drawn. So it's always axis and the plural form axis. And what does it refer to? It refers to the smallest charting area for a data frame to plot in. I think that is not the official way to talk about it, but I think it's a practical way to understand it. So when we say df.plot, we are expecting one figure, right? We're expecting the whole data, whether it's multiple columns or single column, to be plotted in one chart. Yeah. So we would be expecting one chart, sort of like one x and one y, although sometimes there are two y axes. So one chart like this, one chart is one axis. All right, again, this is not the official technical definition, but it's practical enough so that we will avoid all the confusions and dual speak between matplotlib, pyplot, and pandas. So one plot, one graph, in layman's terms, one graph is one axis in matplotlib, pyplot's lingo. All right, so axis is the charting area, And then we can talk about figure. Figure is to support the notion that sometimes we like to plot a few figures together. For example, there are 4 columns here, A, B, C, D, in this data frame here. I might want to actually plot A itself as a time series, B, C, D, because they correspond to 4 weeks sales figures or count figures, COVID-19 occurrence figures, whatnot. So I might want to plot them as 4 charts, but then I don't want separate big charts. I want them to be compiled as a 2 by 2 chart, or more likely 4 by 1, right? So that we can compare. But no matter what, how do we talk about that combination thing, right? It's not called axis because we are now plotting 4 times. One DF plot generates, or you can think about it as produces, 1 axis. So if you're going to DF plot 4 times, you're going to get 4 axes, right? And that's true. And how do we talk about that container that contains the 4 axes? That's called figure. Figure, go figure, right? Figure. So a figure has a specific meaning in matplotlib pyplot. That's why it's called figure, right? So when we say plot plt as an alias for matplotlib.pyplot, plt.figure, open close bracket, and run it, it will produce a new blank figure. If you didn't call it and then directly do a DF plot, you realize sometimes it works. I say sometimes because when it's out of sync, it might produce a blank screen and then plot one or whatnot. So it works because if there is no existing or standard figure shown, or it's the first time you run, but you immediately do a DF plot, rather than telling you error, you can't proceed because you forgot to run figure, matplotlib pyplot basically just runs the plt.figure on your behalf and produces a blank figure. So in other words, if you on the screen see an axis because you see only one chart, the figure is actually also invisibly containing it. So there is one figure, and then it happens that you only have 1 axis in it. And of course, figure is designed to hold more than 1 axis. And you can also specify, do you want it to be in 2 by 2 form, or 4 by 1, or 1 by 4 form. So it is very versatile and definitely allows us to produce all kinds of comparison charts for us to use in our contextual purposes. So once we have produced this figure, then we can ask, how do I then refer to that top right pie chart, and I want to change the color, I want to change the title or whatnot. Then what you do is, it is actually the figure, it's actually a subplot, right? An axis is a subplot inside the figure. So you can refer to the axis, and everything that you deal with the axis, for example, if you change the X scale or the Y scale or drawings or what or color, you only affect the axis. So think of the axis as the chart itself, and the figure is like a canvas containing many charts. I don't want to introduce more terms, then it's already confusing. So figure is the big canvas, right? So big, the highest, the grandest, the biggest and most versatile container that PyPlot has to offer. And axis is that individual chart. We refer to that. And of course, we can say ax.setTitle, then we change the title. For example, we might call this the sort of a pie chart for severity cases for COVID-19. All right, so then this only pie chart makes sense about the severity of COVID cases, and the rest will be trend line. As time passes, are there more and more and more COVID cases, or it goes up and then trends down, or something like that. So we can actually refer to individual charts separately and have different chart type, and still, very conveniently sort of position them within a big canvas that we call figure. So now that we are familiar, we can now safely say that anything to change in the figure, for example, I want to change the figure's title. So the figure's title is Study of COVID-19 in Singapore, for example. So if that's the case, then we need to say something like figure dot something, right? Because that's natural to say that we point to that figure and then say do something about the big thing. If we want to do something about the smaller thing, like the axis, then we say ax, because ax is the variable that points to the axis, and say ax dot, for example, set title, and that will only change the title for that particular plot. Okay, so that's the concept behind. We would always start with plt.figure, right, to create a new figure, and then by default we'll plot on that. So df.plot, draw the figure. And then if we need to tweak something further, then we say which axis do you want to tweak. So data in the data frame in df gets a new name, and it's called axis when it's sort of plotted in a graph.